Okay, I'd like to call this meeting of the Goldsboro Planning Commission to order, Wednesday, October 29th at 6 o'clock. Roll call
Chair Warwick,
here.
Vice Chair Schoonover,
Here.
Commissioner Hammond,
Here.
Commissioner Lilly,
Here.
Commissioner Berggren, excuse me, Counselor Berggren, as our council liaison.
Here.
All are present.
We have opportunity for public comment. This is not related to the public hearing. If there's any general comments for the commission.
It's so not about the hearing.
Not related to the hearing.
Oh,
Yeah, there'll be an opportunity later. Yeah. Minutes approval of the June 8th, 2025 Planning Commission meeting. I'm assuming everyone has had a chance to read those. Do we have a motion to approve? Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
You have to be this close to your microphone.
Okay.
Okay, who did you actually recognize in the second? So they both said it.
And then. You said people.
The chair.
Yeah.
Both did. Who did you recognize?
I'll recognize David. He was first. Yeah. Let's see. Okay, at this time, 6:02 PM. We will open the public hearing to accept public testimony regarding the proposed amendments to the zoning maps, comprehensive plan maps, and the text amendment to the City of Gold Hill Municipal Code 17 zoning regarding the definition of roof signs and amending the stories allowed in the downtown zone. The applicant is the City of Gold Hill. This meeting of the Gold Hill Planning Commission will be conducted according to the Gold Hill Comprehensive Plan and applicable ordinances, as well as those of the state of Oregon as they apply to legislative actions. A summary of the rules is as follows. The planning staff will identify and explain the laws and procedures governing this action. For legislative hearings, the applicable criteria are number one, the proposal shall be consistent with the city's adopted goals and policies pertaining to land use, growth, and development. Number two, the proposal shall be consistent with all applicable statewide planning goals. These are the criteria that the Planning Commission must use in making a decision. All testimony and evidence must be directed towards these criteria or others as applicable in the comprehensive plan or land use regulation, which the person testifying believes to be relevant to these hearing issues. When offering testimony, please relate your presentation to the listed criteria. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the commission and the applicants an opportunity to respond to this issue shall preclude appeal to the Oregon State Land Use Board of Appeals based on that issue. All participants are free to express their views about whether the proposed legislation is good policy or appropriate use of city resources. Any person who participates in this hearing may receive a mailed notice of the Planning Commission's final decision by requesting the notice in writing. All persons testifying shall have 3 minutes unless the chair grants additional time at the request of the speaker.
Well, can you go back to the previous paragraph and then the item on the agenda is, and then read the agenda item, and I'll have it on.
All right. Yeah, the first item on the agenda is as follows. New business. Public hearing for consideration of a recommendation of the City Council for an ordinance adopting proposed text amendments to the Gold Hill Municipal Code, Comprehensive Plan, and zoning map. Proposed ordinance to amend Title 17 zoning 17.41.030.DD, revising the definition of roof signs, section 17.26.060A, 17.36.090B.1, and 17.36.090.B.2, amending building height standards in the downtown zone. So I'll repeat that last section. All persons testifying shall have 3 minutes unless the chair grants additional time at the request of the speaker. Any time spent answering questions from the commission will not be considered as part of the speaker's allotted time. Each person offering comments during this hearing must state his or her name and address and write that same information on the sign-up sheet found on the table. We wish to hear from everyone who is interested in the proposal. However, we request that you do not infringe on someone else's speaking time by repeating evidence already provided. The laws and procedures applicable to this legislative item shall be presented by the Rogue Valley Council of Governments planning staff as part of the staff report. We will begin this hearing with a staff report, statements by persons in favor of the application, statements by persons in opposition to the application, and an opportunity for additional comments by staff. After final comments from staff, the public comment portion will be closed and the matter will be discussed and acted upon by the Planning Commission. This hearing is in addition to the required city council hearing to provide an additional opportunity to accept written and oral testimony in advance of the city council hearing. The written testimony and the minutes of this meeting will be provided to the city council prior to their meeting as part of the record. Does anyone wish to provide testimony on a separate matter that is not on the agenda this evening? No. Is there anyone present who wishes to challenge the authority of the Planning Commission to take testimony on this matter? No. Do any commissioners wish to abstain from participating in this hearing or declare a conflict of interest or potential conflict of interest? No. No. Okay. This is a legislative action, not quasi judicial, so ex parte contact is not applicable. We will now begin with the staff report. Dick Converse, can you please present the staff report?
It would be safe, but it's not.
I'd like to go backwards. And if we can go back to the declaring the potential conflict of interest or conflict of interest. If any of you own property that is being affected, it would be appropriate to say, I potentially have a conflict of interest in that I have a property affected. Anybody that's property was in the R1U, that's switching to R1, or any of these others, I just want to make sure that we're aware that you want to make sure to declare that.
I do in fact have a property that is currently R1U.
I do not.
You do not? I don't believe I do.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Lily. Dick, can you please present the staff report?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. I was in my lap. Okay, we'll try this. Thank you. I'm Dick Converse. I'm what we would call Principal Land Use Planner Emeritus for RVCOG.
Yeah.
I've been called back to work on another project, but in preparing for that project, we've been doing quite a bit of work with Gold Hill. And much of it is very applicable to what we will be doing in the future, both for Gold Hill and for 7 other jurisdictions, primarily working on housing issues. But this is a kind of a cleanup ordinance that we're bringing before you as a recommendation to the city council. Thank you for declaring your residence or ownership of land in R1U, but there's nothing else we can do with that property. It's essentially, there are 4 issues we're looking at tonight. 2 of them relate, well, one relates to providing appropriate zones based on work that was done in 2023. We have 3 zones on the map that don't exist in the code, so we need to update those. That's the R1U and the fact that the C1 and C2 zones have been replaced by downtown and general commercial. So we need to reallocate those properties regardless. And there's very little discretion involved in that. There is some with respect to the commercial zones because the downtown zone actually allows RV parks where the, it allows the residences basically in conjunction with commercial use, and the general commercial zone allows the RV parks. And we'll get into that discussion a little bit as we go through the list of recommendations. Another one is to change the zones of multiple parcels to reflect what's actually used on the parcels. That'll probably be the bulk of the discussion this evening with respect to land use designations. And then there are 2 code amendments that are coming before you. One of them is it's in the height restrictions section of the downtown zone, but the attempt here is not to revise the height limitations, but instead to allow a 3rd floor where you would have a ground floor commercial and then you would have up to 2 floors of residential above that. Right now, it's limited to a single unit. Some of the downtown development that's occurred in the last 20 years is restricted to just 2 levels. And it seems practical and is consistent with other jurisdictions to have that 2nd level above the commercial. So that comes as a recommendation as well. And then we got into an issue with respect to the parapet signs. If you look around Gold Hill, probably 75% of the signs are parapet signs. It's just the common practice in Gold Hill. And yet the definition of roof signs that are prohibited includes parapet signs. So we're simply recommending that the wall parapet sign be removed from the roof sign definition, and that would allow the continuation of the common practice here. So it sounds big, but it's not. It's really just recognizing what is already occurring. So there was one other area that was initially included in the notice, that there would be maybe some R3 zone applied to some single family zoning and single family uses, but to provide for, more multifamily use in the future. After some discussion, we pulled that from consideration. It was still in the notice, so we had to address it, but we're recommending that there not be action on that at this time. An area that is of concern is some of those changes to reflect use, and that relates to housing. And that's the R3 zoning that's basically Patrick Elementary School. It's zoned R3, but it would not be included in any land use inventory because it would be exempted because it's public. We would just subtract that land out. So while it looks like there would be significant acreage being removed from the R3 inventory, there's not any reduction in actual opportunity for multifamily housing by that change. The criteria are in section 17.84.010 for land use district map and text amendments. The purpose of chapter 1784 is to provide standards and procedures for legislative and quasi-judicial amendments to this code and the land use district. And what we have determined is this is a legislative action. It's something that's coming from the city. It's broad-based. There are some specific properties involved, but they're not coming as request of individual property owners. So our finding in that respect is that the proposed amendments reflect the changes in land use districts to make land use designations compatible with the existing uses. Section 17.84.030 establishes the Planning Commission review and recommendation to the City Council of any ordinance amending the zoning map, development code, or comprehensive plan. And it needs to be based on these criteria. The first is that if the property involves an amendment to the comprehensive plan, the amendment must be consistent with the statewide planning goals and relevant or administrative rules. Some of those properties that are changing, for example, from residential to public and public to residential, those will have to have a different underlying comprehensive plan map designation. So we are looking at comprehensive plan map changes, not any changes to the comprehensive plan map text, but to the map. And so one of those requirements is that if it involves an amendment to the comp plan, it must be consistent with the statewide planning goals and relevant Oregon administrative rules. We did receive comment from Matthew Hogan, who is with the Fair Housing Council of Oregon. His comment began with, "It's a great amendment," but he also said he felt that we should make a finding about consistency with goal 10, which is the housing goal. Essentially, this is a neutral action tonight, with the exception of that addition of a second residential floor above commercial. That could actually be argued to,
Downtown.
I'm sorry, downtown, thank you. The one we're looking at. Yeah, where it would allow that second residential above the commercial building. That will increase opportunities or the variety of housing that can be provided in Gold Hill. So I emailed the fellow back and said that to me appears to be a positive action with respect to housing. The rest of them are neutral. We're just reflecting existing land uses. So I'm hoping he's going to be okay with that. He said he would be providing a letter. I provided an email to him this morning outlining my take on this, and I am going to presume that he was comfortable with that. And as I said, the one positive change is an intent to increase the number of allowed residential floors above ground floor commercial. And I also let him know too, because they're concerned about affordable housing, about just increasing housing inventory statewide. And we have obtained a grant from DLCD, but primarily from the Housing Accountability and Production Office to assist communities in updating their codes. These are mandatory statutory things that have to be added, but they will update the code to be consistent with state law. So I think in all of that discussion, he realizes that housing is a significant issue in the future for Gold Hill, but this particular action tonight has very little effect on the housing goal. But I did want to address that so that I would respond to what he had commented about. The third criterion is that the proposal must be consistent with the comprehensive plan, and the comp plan map, or the comp plan may be amended concurrently with the proposed changes in zoning. And that's what we're doing. We're making sure, and in the list of recommendations, when there is a comprehensive plan amendment that's required, it's listed as to what that change would be. So those are spelled out for you there. The fourth one is that the council must find that the proposal is in the public interest with regard to community conditions. The proposal either responds to changes in the community, or it corrects a mistake or inconsistency in the subject plan or code. As we've stated earlier, most of these are to correct inconsistencies, both in the lack of the zoning map designations reflecting the code, and in the reflection of existing uses in the zoning, rather than having these pretty serious conflicts between what's actually on the property and what it's zoned for. The fifth is that the amendment must conform to section 17.84.050, which is transportation planning compliance. There's a transportation planning rule that is actually Oregon Administrative Rule 660-12-0060. And it says that if an amendment to a land use regulation change, including a zoning map, would significantly affect an existing or planned transportation facility, then the local government must place mitigation measures unless the amendment is allowed under this rule. And then it talks about what would be considered a significant change. Well, in all of those options, this proposal is not affecting that. I also noted for the record that there is a transportation system plan that has been approved for Gold Hill that you'll be working on for probably a pretty healthy amount of time, that will bring any questions they would have about consistency with the transportation planning rule at that point. Again, because this is a relatively low key change tonight, I am proposing a finding that there's no significant change that would require any kind of amendment to the compliance with the transportation planning rule at this point. So that brings us to the recommendation, and I think we're going to have a map up maybe. I listed these sort of in order of priority, kind of moving from the least discretionary to the most discretionary. The first one is to rezone all R1U parcels to R1. And that's basically the north part of the city, the steep part of the city, but it also is the area, most of the area west of Highway 234 as you head north. Many of those lands are public, but there are some private lands in there as well. All we're doing with that is taking the U off. There's no R1U zone, it's residential. There are standards now that relate to slope. Development on slopes has issues. And so once it's over a certain slope, essentially you're not able to create new parcels. There are several layers of lot size that are permitted based on the kind of slope. But the permitted uses within the zone are the same as R1. So there's just no change there at all. Another area we're looking at is in this question of we've got C1 and C2 zoning. What should it be? And the curious part is we already have some area that was rezoned to downtown, but there were still quite a few parcels that were shown as C1 and C2. We don't have those anymore. So we try to gauge the best use, kind of on that opportunity for housing in conjunction with commercial, or if it's an RV park, we would look at a change there. Again, I'll get into those. I'm getting ahead of myself here. But the first one would be to rezone the area north of 4th Avenue between Dardanelle Street and Gustav from C1 to downtown. I forgot to mention that we had an open house. I think it was on October 16th. 3 hours. I think we had 11 people, but we wanted to give people the opportunity to come and ask questions. And we did receive a question from the owner of a representative of the owner of the apartments on 4th Avenue. And we were able to assure him that this change to downtown is preferable to the change to GC in his particular case. And he seemed to go away satisfied. He has, I think, had some of the biggest questions that we were able to answer in an open house concept. So I'm glad we did it. I was a little concerned that the number was low, but we were hopeful that the notice was clear enough that people were realizing it wasn't an earth-shaking thing that we were bringing forward. The third one is to rezone 1383 and 1475 North 2nd Avenue from C1 to GC. Now that's the Gold Hill self-storage, and there's I want to say blue building, just this side of it, that I think is vacant right now. It looked like they were doing some remodeling inside, but those two, the storage and that commercial building, we're recommending R1 general commercial for that. And then the fourth, again, in area of importance, is permitting buildings in the downtown zone to have 3 stories, with the first floor reserved for commercial uses and the upper 2 floors for residential use. And we've discussed that. There were several privately owned properties that are zoned public. And so 284 North 1st Avenue, 360 Riverside, 433 North 5th, 461 North 5th, and 489 North 5th, the 3 parcels just south of here, are zoned public. All of them have residences. And so it makes sense in that case to change those from public to R1 and to change the comprehensive plan to low density residential. I've got the tax lot, map lot numbers listed in there for official purposes. And then Lazy Acres RV Park is number 6. That was zoned downtown. It was a mystery to current staff because downtown actually does not allow RV parks, as far as I could tell. And what we're looking for is something that's compatible. The general commercial zone does allow RV parks, at least as a conditional use, if not a permitted use. So that brings out to a greater consistency between the zoning and use. Ray's Market is still C2, so we're recommending that be GC. The water treatment plant is zoned R1. It's publicly owned, and yet it's zoned R1. So there's a proposal to change that from R1 to P, public, and to change the comprehensive plan designation to public. Patrick Elementary School is the one that's fun because it's zoned R3. And yet it's a public use. Curiously, if you look clear back to the older comprehensive plans, and it's kind of in hieroglyphics, it's an old map. It showed as public school or something of that type in the past, more consistent with what was going on there. Somehow in the evolution of mapping, it ended up showing as R3. Well, that's inconsistent. And again, that could raise a concern because it's high density residential and we're taking all that away. Well, when you do a buildable lands inventory, you take public lands out of that review. So it, again, is a neutral change as far as I'm concerned. Parts of the Swede Machinery property are zone P, they're zone public. And so we're just suggesting that all of their ownership be light industrial. One area that has changed a bit in practice is the area between the railroad and Fourth Avenue. In my past, when I came here, the 22 years I was working for the COG, that was basically just a vacant, unused lot. Now it's been fenced off, and I think Swede is using it more for their business. It's their ownership. It just seems consistent to have all of their ownership in a specific zone, and we are proposing light industrial for that. Now there's a curious little parcel that's enveloped by Patrick Elementary School, that's city owned. And it is a former, apparently, septic systems. Again, we're going back in time quite a ways. But they are zoned R3 and yet they're owned by the city. Again, that makes sense to change that to public. With a public comprehensive plan designation as well. Gold Hill Mobile Estates at 742 North 2nd and 750 North 2nd Avenue are still shown as C2 on the maps. We're recommending a GC zone there. And there was a little bit of discussion on that because the mobile home park technically could fit in an R2 zone. But you never know what's going to change over time. And so we thought that retaining a commercial designation would make sense for that property. And so we're recommending GC for that. We're getting close. Oh, then the definition of roof sign, we've actually got the proposed text change in there. Currently, a roof sign means any sign wholly erected, constructed, or maintained on the road, on the roof structure or parapet wall of any building. And we're just suggesting that we remove or parapet wall so that we have a clear definition of roof structure signs or roof signs. And then parapet signs would be more consistent with the typical wall sign. And again, consistent with the way it has been done in Gold Hill for many years. So that seems more just a reflection of existing use rather than a radical change. And then the last recommendation is that we do not pursue at this time a change from R1 to R3 on Kellogg Street and Davis Street. So those are the recommendations. I hope I didn't thoroughly confuse you with that. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Sure.
I wanted to speak a little bit to the proposal of the code to change the language of downtown from the language of the building height in the code states limited to 35 feet and 2 stories. But if there's residential above the commercial space, they can go to 40 feet. But in R2 and R3, they're allowed 3 stories and 35 feet. But downtown was restricted to 2 stories and 35 feet, but actually 40 feet. So the recommendation would be consistency of since R2 and R3 allow 3 stories, downtown should also allow 3 stories, not changing the height designation. So if there's residential above commercial, it would be allowed to go to 40 feet for that extra 5 feet. But if it's just commercial, it'd be limited to the 35 feet like the other building restrictions. The one other exception in the code is commercial is 50 feet, but that's not being recommended any changes. So the reason why we're bringing in the downtown is to allow that 3-story. And one other reason is as we were looking on the map to this area between Gustav and Dardanelle on 4th Avenue, that was commercial. it is solid residential between Gustav and Estramato, with a vacant lot in there. But at the corner of Fredenberg and Fourth, there's actually a 3-story structure, where the old fire station has 2 stories above it. And so allowing for, if looking at general commercial versus downtown, which would be more in line with what's there. At Massey's at the corner of Dardanelle and Fourth, there's commercial space with residences above. And so we felt that since what it had before is no longer in the code, and we had to look at, do we go to general commercial or to go to downtown? We felt downtown was more consistent. But because the other residential zones that are higher density allow 3-story, that's why the recommendation of 3-story in the downtown to bring that consistency. And for those of you that are not familiar with parapet, it's that extension of a wall up above a roof at the front that looks like a higher building frontage that you see all our signs on. Only in 2023, they decided to add parapet as not allowed for signs. Yet if you go through our town, 95% of our signs are on a parapet. And so anybody that would want to update a sign would be out of compliance with our code, even though every building in town has one that is in the downtown area. So feeling that it would be appropriate to update the roof sign definition to not include parapet that is created for signage, this would bring that into compliance and compatible with what every building in town is already doing in the past code.
And just to add to that a little bit, the sign issue came up because a use was changing, and it was a relatively recent use, maybe 10 to 15 years ago, and the sign was approved for that. But when they came in to replace the sign, oops, it's on the parapet, we can't do it. So that was kind of the specific genesis for making this change. But again, consistency is what we're looking for. The one thing about the extra 5 feet in the commercial zone going from 35 to 40, my sense of that is that sometimes you'll have a higher ceiling in the commercial building portion. And so this would allow a normal height above the increased height of the first floor.
Okay, thank you, Dick and Lily. Do any commissioners have any questions of the staff?
No.
No, sir? Okay.
Mr. Chair,
Oh, yeah, go
You
ahead.
gotta speak in that mic better.
can I ask questions? Oh, okay. So just want to make one statement. When we were going through the title 17 and we were looking at the downtown zone, I remember us saying we want to try to keep that old time charm.
Right.
So I think this keeps in line with that. And then the only other thing I had was, Nick, could you give me the definition of what the downtown zoning is?
No, I don't have the code in front of me. The 2 zones that are available are downtown. Downtown is basically the core of the city.
Right.
And we talked about that with respect to Fourth Avenue, but it actually squares that off a little bit. We've got the Second Avenue commercial, the railroad, and then that small area of commercial above that. It feels like a nice town square. And when we go to, we are still puzzled as to how Lazy Acres became downtown. It just does not seem consistent. It's at the edge of town. It's separated from other commercial uses by residential and public.
But downtown use is still, it's just an area. It's not. I'm trying to figure out what's the difference between our commercial
I can hear.
and
Yeah, there's.
Address it. Let me pull up the code. The city's goal is to strengthen the downtown district as the heart of the community and as the logical place for people to gather and create a business center. The district is intended to support this goal through elements of design and appropriate mixed-use development. This chapter provides standards for the orderly improvement of the downtown district based on the following principles, and it lists an A through I on those principles. So this is under section 17.36.010 in the current code. And I would point out if if I were to see if I can get here just a second for me, and I'll show you on the existing map. It'll take-
That answer my question. It's a
Okay,
mixed use.
it is a mixed use, yeah.
I was trying to figure out, I was trying to wrap my head around. Are we excluding the residential, are we excluding commercial, what are we trying to make it like just a park area kind of? That's what I was trying to do. Thank you, you answered my question.
I would show you on our zoning map. Let's see here, will it show? It's taking a minute to load. Generally speaking, the downtown, under this current path goes to about Gustav. Down Second on both sides of the street. And now with the proposal today, will also be on the former Main Street. Fourth Avenue was the main street of this town at one point from Gustav to Dardanelle. So the portions that would be downtown are kind of in that square function here on the map, even though it didn't actually show up in the colors there for you. Sorry about that.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions? Okay. With testimony, we will now call on those who wish to testify on the application. Please state your name and residential address for the record, sign the sheet on the table, and limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Oh, okay. Although I'm sure you could hear me from there, but I'm sure it's being taped. My name is Karen McNeely and my husband Pat McNeely. We live at 55 Kellogg Street. And yes, in your recommendation number 13, it says you are not pursuing at this time to change from R1 to R3, the designation of Davis and Kellogg Street. My question is, at this time, what does it mean? In the near future, are you looking to, as Dick, are you looking to pick that up, that idea up again?
Finish your testimony and then he can respond.
Oh, okay. My question is, it says at this time, I have two questions. Why would it go from R1 to R3 and skip R2? And the second is, when are you looking, if you are, as part of your affordable housing, putting in multi-family units on Kellogg or Davis, when there is a riparian setback coming soon to that area? I have a question for Dick. When are you thinking of picking this up again?
I need you to finish your testimony and then they can return for questions.
Okay.
So you can take your whole time, but I don't want us to interrupt with answering the question during.
Okay, I misunderstood. I thought it was,
Not
I
a,
had 3 minutes and it was a back and forth.
you have 3 minutes, but not a back and forth.
Okay. So of course, we are going to say our property, when the setback goes in, which we know is coming down the pipeline in order for the city limit to expand, take more than half of our property. And there will be no place for a second, and that's all the houses between Davis and Kellogg. Towards the school, will have riparian setbacks with no property left to multifamily units. So we're wondering if you're picking this up again, picking it up again, and why you would skip from R1 to R3. Thank you.
Okay, do any commissioners have any comments or questions for the speaker?
I have one. Could you identify this on the map, the area she's talking about?
So in the notice, this area here, where you have these parcels down in this area, were originally noticed for changing to R3. This portion is R3 here, and this portion was R3. And so this was the portion in between two different R3 zones. Recommendation of staff is that this not be changed, that we're not recommending going forward with that. So we had to address it in the staff report because it was noticed. But our recommendation is not to move forward for that. So that's why you do not see it on the map here, because we're not recommending moving forward with that change.
And I can't answer your question with regards to future and whether that's,
And honestly, planning commission, I mean, you could avoid our recommendation. I wouldn't, I mean, that's not recommended usually, but that's why it's a recommendation. But at the time when the city addresses housing and other needs in the area, we need to look at the entire city boundary before that. So the opportunity of if there's annexation, if there's an urban growth boundary extension, that will be a multi-month, potentially years process where you look at the inventory of all the required areas in an urban growth boundary and the whole of the boundary. And then you look at those areas to address. So the question had arisen that because Patrick Elementary is coming off of R3, are we required to replace it? And it started as a question and it got added to the list of change. And it wasn't meant to be added. It was meant to be, is this something we have to address as a question? And it got added by mistake. So that's why our recommendation is to not have it there. To be honest, I didn't even realize it had been added to the list because I had asked the question. I was waiting for answers to verify. And it was only after Mrs. McNeely came in and that I found out it was included. And so immediately got a hold of staff. It's like, this was not the intent for it to be added. We were trying to make sure that we're, asking all the questions that we have to with the staff. And it's why Fair Housing actually got in touch and saying, wait, what's your impact on housing here? Because you're removing R3. And that was my question that we were asking. But we believe that has been addressed in the findings. Now, as a planning commission, your goal is to look through. Staff has each criteria listed out in the 2 points, 2.1 through whatever they were. And here's the goal the city has to meet, and the finding of staff says whether we met it or not. When you move forward, you're affirming, are their findings correct? Or do you think their findings were wrong? And based on those findings, staff made a recommendation. Your piece at that point then is, are you going to recommend, are you going to refer to the council as staff recommended? Or are you going to put it off towards down the road? Or are you going to make amendments to that? So that's the planning commission's role, are the findings right? You kind of rule on that and then you make a recommendation of what moves forward. The portions on Kellogg and Davis were not intended to be a part of this discussion. It was asking the questions of what's the impact of Patrick in that area going from R3 to public going to be on our total stuff. And it wasn't ever intended to be included in this project. That is going to be down the road when we address further things. And we're not going to look at one neighborhood. We're going to look at the entire boundary of the city and what the potential UGB expansion would be and where that inventory would need to be at that time.
And in the introduction to the application, I had mentioned my concern about that as well. We had multiple staff working on the notice and it ended up being there. To me, it was a little inconsistent with what we're doing tonight. What we're trying to do is align zoning with existing uses, not with anticipated uses. Now, with respect to the question about all of this housing stuff that we're looking at, the grant that that RVCOG received has a life of June of 2027. I'll be 74 years old, which I'm kind of startled at thinking about that. But so it's a relatively long process. We'll just be getting involved in that. One thing, we're looking at state mandates. So the state statutes have changed. We have to do certain things, but because Gold Hill is as small as it is, it does not have nearly the requirements that cities larger than 2,500 have. Your code already allows duplexes in the R1 zone. But your point's well taken too. Is R2 zoning more appropriate than R3? Those are the kinds of questions that we'll work on, but to me, it's the future discussions, and those will be pretty extensive. But I have just gotten the grant. I'm working on the agreement now. We probably won't even start on it until the first of the year, gathering information, and we'll have the full public hearing process. And I expect to really necessary to have open houses to really explain what we're doing.
It's not.
Does staff have any closing comments?
No.
We will now close the public testimony portion of the hearing and deliberate. Anybody have any comments or? And again, Lily kind of mentioned we have options to continue this to a specific date and time, approve the application and recommendation as presented, approve the application with conditions, approve the application with conditions as modified by the planning commission, or deny the application due to failure to meet criteria.
I would respond that our recommendation does not include conditions. If you wanted to apply conditions to any of those, you could, but the staff report did not recommend conditions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would be in favor of recommending to the council as presented in the staff report. And you guys have any other questions? Or
He's talking
comments?
because Lily's not here yet.
Yeah. So any other questions or comments? Do we have a motion?
Yeah, I would motion as stated there to accept the
As presented,
as presented.
But as presented by the staff report. Do we have a second?
I second it.
So it has been moved and seconded. I'll let you repeat it.
Motion to approve
Recommend.
recommended present the presentation by the council or staff, sorry,
As presented by staff
as presented by staff.
and seconded by Hugh. Roll call.
Commissioner Lilly,
Here.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes or no?
Commissioner Hammond,
Yes.
Vice Chair Schoonover,
Yes.
Chair Warwick,
Yes.
motion carries 4-0.
We will now close the public hearing at 6:48 PM. Let's see. I think the last thing on the agenda would be potential next meeting for the planning commission.
Correct, and so now the code says meet once a quarter. So we probably are done for this calendar year. We'll get one scheduled in the first quarter of next year unless something comes up sooner. Addressing that, so it'll be to be determined at this point is what the agenda says.
Okay, sounds good. I guess we'll, yeah.
You get any people seeking information on developable land in this area?
You mean, do I keep an inventory of developable land within the city limits?
My perception is that there's very little developable land in the city.
So, in order to answer a question of developable land, it is a matter of, is it developable for industrial? Is it developable for commercial? Is it developable for residential? there is a lot of land available for residential development. We have several acres available for residential development. It's privately owned. And that means that, those owners have a right to choose what they do with their property. I do know that one of the properties that there's approximately between 6 to 11 acres is interested in developing. But, that's not come before us yet. So there are vacant lots here and there. There's a vacant lot within, commercial area. There's a couple potential there, but there's mostly residential only available for buildable lands. We have frequent requests to give zoning specifics for specific parcels or areas. So we answer that. Before I leave tonight, I'll be replying to a call I got earlier today that asked me to email information and about a property. So yes, that's something that happens pretty frequently, but I don't have an inventory. It's mostly just what I see when I drive around and what vacant lots are in which subdivisions or which areas. Or people will call with specific questions about specific tax lots that we can look up.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, we'll adjourn this meeting at 6:51